In the series Beforeigners, young people in Oslo encounter when they spot a mysterious light and see people emerging from the water who came from different times in the past. Detective Lars and his new partner, Alfhildur, investigate a case about the death of a girl who was a time traveler. In these times where time travelers collide with the modern era, can both detectives solve the mystery of the time rift? Keep watching to know more. The series started with some young people having fun near the seashore in Oslo. One of them was about to jump into the sea when he suddenly saw a light coming from the water. He stepped back after seeing the light. Then he saw a man emerging from the sea asking for help. After him, many other people also appeared out of the sea, looking very terrified. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes. The young people rescued them and called the police. In another scene, Detective Lars Holland and his wife were about to move into a new apartment. After signing the agreement, they looked very happy. Then the detective got a call. Detective Lars Holland arrived at the scene and gave the rescued people blankets because they were cold. The detectives realized that these people were from Iceland. Lars called someone who knew Scandinavian languages to understand them. The interpreter told the detectives that the people pulled from the water spoke in an old dialect. Lars planned to call psychiatrists because he thought those people were not mentally well. But then, he saw TV reports showing that people from various periods of the past had started appearing out of the water in different parts of the world. Scientists had no explanation for this phenomenon. Several years after the incident, Norwegian society had changed significantly due to the arrival of people from different time zones into the 21st century. Their population was around 13,000 by then. Lars had divorced and shared custody of his daughter Ingrid with his ex-wife. His ex-wife had remarried a man named Gregers, who was from the previous century. Due to constant stress, Gregers began using a type of eye drop medicine called temproxat, which was used by time travelers for mental stabilization, but he kept it hidden from others. One day, while Ingrid was spending the night at her father's place, she asked Lars to take her to her mother. As they were leaving in the elevator, they encountered a goat kept there by neighbors from the Stone Age, so they decided to take the stairs instead. After dropping off Ingrid, Lars received a call and went to the seashore, where the body of a girl from the past had been found. A colleague suggested it was an accident, but Lars couldn't draw any conclusions. That morning, Lars's department welcomed a new detective, Alfhildur Engin's daughter, a girl from the past who had undergone training at the police academy. Lars examined the drowned woman, noting an ancient tattoo and strange marks on her back, and thought this case was different. Experts confirmed she had been strangled. The head officer assigned Alfhildur as Lars's partner and made her lead the investigation, since Lars was deemed unfit to lead due to his mental state. The pair questioned port police officers and discovered one, Jeppe, had received an injection. Jeppe explained he had helped a time traveler over the weekend and needed tetanus shots after being scratched. After their conversation, Lars and Alfhildur went to the temporary center where all time travelers were brought. There were many people who needed care, explanations about what had happened, and temproxat. They showed the time travelers a photo of the deceased, but no one recognized her. Only one girl suddenly claimed to have seen the girl and said that a sea monster, Hafgufa, had trapped her. Lars did not believe this. In the evening, Lars went home and visited a neighbor, a time traveler who was butchering a goat in the kitchen. The neighbor provided Lars with temproxat. Lars returned home. The next day, Alfhildur reported the monster at the department meeting, causing the police to laugh. They told her to be logical. However, Lars thought the monster described sounded like a troll net. Alfhildur found the man she had been searching for on social media. She found him in a cafe restroom and reminded him of an unpleasant encounter from 1007 years ago. The man laughed and tried to assault her, but she couldn't stop him. Lars, who had followed her, heard her screams and rescued her. He told her she was acting strangely and threatened to report her. But Alfhildur revealed she knew about his temproxat addiction, so if he reported her, she wouldn't stay silent. Lars backed down and drove her to her trailer. From then on, they found common ground. That night, two men used a net to catch a young girl from the past in the bay. The scene shifted to 1031 AD, where the warrior maiden Alfhildur arrived at a gathering of huts searching for her commander Thorir Hund, the killer of Olaf the Stout. A seer told her that a red-haired girl had already been looking for him, and that Thorir was in a place where cities shone with thousands of lights. In the present, Lars saved his wild neighbor from a bandit attack and went to the station. He shared his troll net theory with Alfhildur and asked her to investigate those who bought such nets. She found a reference to a security agency called Cro-Magnon. Meanwhile, several wild-looking people were hunting in the suburban forest. A completely naked man caught a hare and went to a house, revealing that Navan, a modern-day caveman, was married to the mansion's owner. Later, 2 employees of the Cro-Magnon security agency visited Navan and informed him that the police were asking about the incident. Navan ordered them to gather all the captured women from the brothel where they had been sold. At the station, Alfilder discovered that a detained woman was her older sister Urdur. Despite their strained relationship, she helped her. Lars's neighbors came to thank him for saving their father. They revealed that their mother and wife had been with them, but were lost at sea. That evening, Alfilder and her sister celebrated their reunion and saw a Cro-Magnon van stopping near a brothel. Alfilder took photos of the workers and reported her suspicion of the security agency's involvement in human trafficking. Lars revealed that while the Cro-Magnon employees were from prehistoric times, the van was registered to a modern man named Gedi. They began surveillance and located the ship in the place where the women were held. The police attacked the guards, neutralized them, and rescued the women. Jeppe, who met them at the pier, expressed admiration and asked Alfilder out, and she agreed. Lars noticed that one of the women had a tattoo similar to his neighbor's. Later, he interrogated Gedi, but he denied everything. That same day, Lars asked his neighbor and son to come to the station, where they were reunited with the found woman, tearfully watching the family reunion. At night, Lars and Alfilder reviewed footage from shore cameras and found a video of the deceased woman entering the water 4 hours before her murder, raising questions about how she could have been there long before the transition. The next day, Tommy, a delivery man, had a bicycle accident. He went to a nearby store's restroom to clean up, and the janitor recognized him as his former commander Thorir Hund. However, Tommy did not understand the janitor's words and left. Meanwhile, an expert informed Lars and Alfilder that the drowned woman was not actually from the past, despite her attempt to appear that way. The detectives went to the center for those displaced from the past, and while questioning the director, his employee Ada secretly copied the contents of their laptops. Later, the police decided to detain the nightclub director, who had used the services of captive women. He refused to discuss Navan's role in their operations. After the interrogation, Alfilder accidentally shot Lars in the leg while trying to store her gun. Meanwhile, Urdur learned from a Viking about Tore's past encounters. Ingrid and her friend Maddie found Lars's temproxat, and Maddie secretly stole one of the vials. That same day, Urdur told Alfilder about Tore. They discovered his address and found out that he was married with a young daughter. The warrior women tracked him to his home, but Thorir did not recognize them. He had forgotten his past and the Old Norse language after traveling to the future. The next morning, technicians confirmed a weapon malfunction, and Alfilder was cleared to continue her duties. Alfilder located a man named Navan who matched the description. They visited his house, but he denied everything despite the evidence. After the police left, Navan noticed Ada spying on his house. She admitted she knew the drowned woman and invited him to a meeting. Meanwhile, Urdur tried again to remind Thorir of his identity, but he drove off. The warrior women saw he was being followed and informed her sister. As they investigated, Thorir was attacked by followers of Olaf the Stout, whom he had killed in the past. Overcome with fear, Thorir began recalling fragments of his battles and fought off the attackers. Afterward, he approached the warrior women, asking them to tell him about Tore. Sometime later, a stylist visited the police and reported that he had done the drowned woman's tattoos and removed all signs of her modern origin. He also mentioned that a man named Navan had shown interest in her. During a hunt, Navan was killed by a drone. The next morning, Ingrid and her friends attempted to simulate time migration. Maddie took temproxat and jumped into the water while her friends filmed her. Suddenly, Maddie disappeared in a flash of light and reappeared surrounded by Vikings. Ingrid jumped into the water to help Maddie while her friends called for assistance. Lars and Alfilder examined Navan's body and found that he had not been killed where his body was discovered. He had crawled a considerable distance before dying. Lars received a message about the incident involving Ingrid and went to the transit camp, where the girls were isolated due to their contact with time migrants. Tests revealed that both girls had temproxat in their blood. Despite this, Alfilder insisted on an immediate search of the forest, though the police were skeptical due to the approaching rain. At the center, Maddie visited Ingrid and confessed that she was experiencing visions. Her teeth had deteriorated significantly after her brief time in the water. After being denied immediate action by the police, Alfilder sought help from Urdur and her friends. They went to the forest, where Alfilder and her team found the crime scene. The next morning, Alfilder reported the results and received gratitude from her superiors. They wondered who could have operated the drone, recalling a group that had fought against modern technology after arriving in the future. Meanwhile, Alfhilder's adversary detective found something suspicious and began to suspect her involvement with the warrior women's clan. This threatened her job, as warriors from the past were not allowed in the police or army. Lars and Alfhilder received a list of those trained to operate drones and found Ada on it. That evening, Maddie came home and, seeing her cross, started praying. The next morning, Lars was awakened by a knock on the door. A persistent stranger insisted on talking about the god Odin and refused to leave. Enraged, Lars threw him into the corridor, where his neighbor inquired about his well-being. Lars assured him he was fine and headed to work, where he reported Ada to the department. Meanwhile, the news reported that Tommy was actually Thorir Hund, the murderer of King Olaf the Stout, who had been revered for Christianizing Norway. He was fired from his job. The detectives learned that Ada had had an affair with one of the time travelers who opposed progress. Thorir Hund was pursued by hordes of religious fanatics. Urder and Alfhilder went to support their commander. Later, Lars reported finding the address of a warehouse rented by Ada, and they went there. They were told that Ada had just taken the keys to the premises. They arrived at the warehouse, but Ada managed to escape. The detectives searched the warehouse and found Maddie's file. They went to Maddie's house, where she was feeling increasingly worse and had almost forgotten modern language. Alfhilder recognized her dialect and wrote down the numbers Maddie kept repeating, which she saw on the wall but could not explain further. Urder informed her sister that Thorir had agreed to participate in a boxing match against an Olaf supporter for money. She left, while Lars continued searching the warehouse and found the drowned woman's jacket. Ada sought refuge with her former lover. Meanwhile, the fight between Olaf's supporter and Thorir began. The warrior women realized their commander was fighting at half strength and reminded him of a past victory. Almost defeated, Thorir recalled the victory, stood up and won. That same day, Lars learned from a police officer that Temproxet was found in Alfhilder's car. He confessed to his superior that the drug was his and stepped down from his duties. Alfhilder agreed to a date with Jeppe. That evening, Lars returned home to find a man who reminded him that he was the first to be rescued from the past by the detective. The man added digits to the sequence Lars had found, revealing the coordinates of the time rift, which connected all the found women. Meanwhile, Jeppe pulled a hair from a sleeping Alfhilder and took it with him. The next day, a Viking who recently arrived suddenly recalled something and asked for a phone. The center staff were shocked when he called Maddie and told her he remembered everything. With the clothes found by Lars, the police identified the drowned woman as being linked to the Neo-Luddite group, which opposed modern technology. Lars mentioned he had been helped by an ancient Norwegian who arrived with the first group to the future, surprising Alfhilder. She discovered something shocking in his file. Lars tried to get more Temproxat, but found that his neighbor no longer provided it. That evening, Ingrid, Alfhilder, and Lars's neighbor visited Lars's apartment. They were worried because the man who had come to Lars had been dead for 2 years. The neighbor had filmed Lars arguing with someone in the corridor, but no one was there. Lars admitted his addiction. Later, Ingrid asked her father to calm the port police, who were overly interested in Maddie. Lars discovered that Jeppe and his partner were not on duty the day the woman drowned and questioned why Jeppe had received shots. Alfhilder found bite marks on Jeppe's skin and biological material that matched the drowned woman. Both policemen were arrested for murder, and Alfhilder was recognized for solving the case. Lars, still puzzled by the time rift and Maddie's mystery, asked to continue the investigation. Thorir took his daughter on a boat ride, and remembering something about a life jacket, celebrated his relocation day with friends. Urder noticed an armed man planning to kill Thorir and sacrificed herself to save him. That night, Lars was kidnapped by Ada's friends. Ada revealed the government was conducting illegal tests on time rift travelers. She gave Lars a hard drive with information on the cases. Thorir then told Alfhilder that he and his Vikings had found a girl in a modern life jacket. It was Alfhilder. Lars's unreal friend visited him again, hinting that time didn't flow in just one direction as the government claimed. Meanwhile, Maddie went to an abandoned temple and unearthed a sword and cross from a place she remembered. Olaf arrived, called her sweet, and promised to show her the salvation of pagan souls.